What's up, guys? Josh Davis here on a Friday, and it is the Philly special. You know what it is. Also, you obviously see we got a guest here. You guys are probably familiar. It's Anthony DeBona, Outside DiBirds. How's it going, man?
It's going good. I'm happy to join the live show for once. This is going to be fun.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it. And those of you that have followed, again, you know that we've done this before, but if you haven't, I highly encourage you to go and follow Anthony. He's on Twitter, Outside the Birds, like I mentioned, also the blog outsidethebirds.com. It is one of the best follows, if not the best follow. Tons of information and everything else. So we're going to get into that. And also just shout out to all you guys in the chat. We are going to answer some questions, whatever you got, coordinators. We got some craziness, obviously Fangio being hired. So I'm curious to get your take, Anthony, as well as, everyone else. It seems to be very polarizing. Lots of different takes on Fangio, as well as, like who we're going to get for positional coaches. Are there shakeups there? Offensive coordinator is still in the works. We've got some interviews going on. So tons to get into here. But how's everybody doing on Friday? First off, how's everybody doing on Friday? Let me know. And then, yeah, let's just jump in here too with Anthony. Your take. The biggest news I think so far coming through this is naturally Vic Fangio. And we texted before, or I guess as the news was breaking, but for those that haven't heard, and also to give you more of a platform now, I'm curious to get the full on thoughts. You've had a moment to kind of decompress, meditate on it. How are we feeling about Vic Fangio?
I'll be honest, at first, if anybody follows me on Twitter, they saw my reaction. I was not excited about it. I was actually kind of terrified because it seemed like we were going to finally get away from that Vic Fangio scheme and coaching tree or whatnot. But then after about an hour or so, and then I took the night to kind of do a bunch of research, and I'm a little bit more comfortable because as I tweeted, like, if it's different to have like the substitute teacher that's kind of passing out the worksheet that Vic Fangio left them and actually having the teacher in Vic Fangio teaching the scheme. So I think it's a huge upgrade as far as that goes. Clearly, they're still hell bent on using the Fangio scheme, so I guess they're just gonna have to figure out how that goes. But Howie Roseman talked up Nakobe Dean and whatnot, whoever else at linebacker. But obviously, they'll have to make upgrades there. They'll have to make upgrades at safety, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But as far as Vic Fangio goes, you pointed out the article from a couple years back that said Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, Matt LaFleur, they were all asked who was the defensive coordinator or defensive mind that they feared the most, and they said it was Vic Fangio. So, I mean, people have said, oh, they figured it out by now, or whatever the case might be. But it's a whole different ballgame when you have a guy that has more years coaching in the NFL than I do on this earth. So, I mean, I trust him to lead, and it's the complete opposite of the inexperience that they had last year on the defensive staff. So, I'm excited to see how it goes and what they build in the offseason.
Yeah, I am too. And I talked about, again, you mentioned there, naturally, I think whenever you're getting a lot of, you're getting praise from a lot of people, understandably. There's some negativity. It was what, 28th, I think, in red zone defense, and so there's some struggles back and forth. But when you look at like those offensive minds, as we've talked about, and several people I've seen have reference to, but you've got a Matt LaFleur, you've got a Sean McVay, you've got a Kyle Shanahan. I mean, all those guys mentioning and saying like that's the most difficult to scheme against, or that's the most difficult to prepare for in a Vic Fangio. And then also, you see that Philly is potentially considering even more Fangio guys, but also they're being considered for. It's like a weird game of musical chairs almost, because Brandon Staley is reportedly he's interviewing with one of the who was it? He got an
With the
interview.
Packers.
The Packers, that's right. Yeah, the Joe
Yes.
Barry is potentially going to be moving around elsewhere. He's interviewing with us for linebackers coach. So it's like, if it didn't do so well and no one believed in it, then naturally, they'd be like, well, they wouldn't get those interviews. But you have the sharp offensive minds that still think there's something there. It just might not be to the flavor of Vic Fangio. So I don't know. I'm interested to see that. Curious too, mentioning Joe Barry, but immediate thoughts. There is the linebacker coach that we're probably, I would imagine, going to see some positional changes naturally. But Mike Caldwell is another name. Jaguars defensive coordinator. People are fairly familiar, I would say, with Mike Caldwell. Played here in Philly. Linebacker. Coach Devin White and Levante David with Tampa. We got some potentials there, but where are you at so far with the linebacker coaches and seeing what that might shake out as?
I'm excited, and it just shows you the advantage that they have looking for coaches at this point in January compared to last year when they were looking in mid to late February or whatever it was. There was so many less options at that point. Now they can they're in the same level as all these other teams that are looking for coaching staffs. So they can go out after the bigger names, the bigger, more experienced guys. Because last year, once Jonathan Gannon took Nick Rallis with him to Arizona, they were struggling. They had nowhere to look for a linebacker coach, and they ended up hiring DJ Elliott, who was basically a rookie in the NFL. He never coached in the NFL level. He just coached a ton in college. So now they're going to go from a guy that had zero NFL experience before last season to either, it seems like Mike Caldwell or Joe Barry. Mike Caldwell has 16 years of NFL coaching experience. Barry has 22 years of coaching experience. So I mean, it's the complete opposite. And obviously, linebacker is a position that's plagued the Eagles for years now. So hopefully, this means not only are they getting better coaches, but they'll be adding better talent at the position as well. So it's exciting.
That's my hope. That's definitely what I'm trying to look at. And apologies too, I'm messing with some of the editing, so people that are seeing what's going on here. I've got a new toy basically, so I'm playing with it, and I may make it worse. But appreciate everybody joining the live stream. Also going to get to these comments, like I said. So first off, here's Chris Brown. These two rock. How's the kid doing, Josh? I appreciate that, Chris. Doing well. Doing well. We're figuring out sleep. As everyone, Anthony, you know the life of trying to manage all that, but we're doing so far so good. Philly Freak says, give Fangio a chance. Go Birds. There you go. There's a positive for that. Nick Nichols says, Mike Caldwell's linebacker coach. I like it. I know it's a long shot. Hey, if you want to stick around or find a petition in the league and parlay that elsewhere, I think he'd be better in the sense of, possibly look at him instead of a DJ Elliott. So I'm in favor of it. Let's see. There's a couple others. The K Dude, what's up, man? How's it going? Imhav, hey, what's up? Unspoken Word says, if Fangio can get us a great linebacker and secondary coaching staff, I'm good. And then let's see, there's another one here I wanted to touch on too. Ridge King, what's up? How's it going? Says, hopefully Fangio teaches a better way of how to run his defense, unlike Gannon and Desai. That feels like a given, right? I mean, should we be slightly concerned still, or do we have a pretty good confidence level in that?
I mean, you have literally the master of the scheme, the guy that created it. So I mean, if he can't teach it, then we have much bigger problems. So I feel like they know. I think Howie Roseman and Nick Sirianni know this because possibly near Sirianni's last chance. So they're going all out and they're saying, if the Fangio's scheme is going to work, then we need the guy that actually created it. So I feel like they know what they kind of backed into a corner, and now they're kind of aiming high. We've seen the names that they've been linked to at offensive coordinator as well. Obviously, they're targeting some big names to join the staff on defense alongside Fangio. So, I mean, they're going to go from basically having zero experience to having a ton of experience. So, I mean, if Sirianni can't make it work with this potential Avengers of a staff, then it's a huge problem. And obviously, they'll probably be moving on from Sirianni and maybe even Roseman or whatever the case might be. So that's hopefully a conversation that we won't be having, but it's just the realistic of the situation.
Yes, I mean, we would naturally hope that's not the case. Because if we're having that, then we're probably sitting here a year from now and going, well, we had another disappointing season. I've seen comments as far as saying, like, we're not going to make playoffs. Like, I know it's possible. I know anything could happen. Yes, it could just be total dumpster fire. Sirianni's gone, burn it all. We talked about for how many weeks, I'm sitting here. I think we're both being kind of positive, like, we're going to ride the ship. We'll get it figured out. But to the extent of we're going to miss playoffs, I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy enough for what we've seen over the 7 weeks to think that that's ridiculous. But I feel like we can at least make playoffs. It's just like, question: are we going to do anything beyond that? But you're right. I mean, I'm right there with you. I feel like this is Sirianni. There was legit concerns. I think I know there's some people saying that Sirianni wasn't going to get fired or there was no chance, but I feel like there was. But without question, I mean, this has to be his make it or break it year. I think he's kind of alluded to it in his press conference, but. Do you feel like he can right the ship in a sense? And we can get into who we think or your favorites for offensive coordinator too. But do you think he can right the ship? Considering, all right, we got Vic Fangio for defensive coordinator. Find someone for the OC. It sounds like Sirianni's going like or said that guy will run the scheme. He's going to be the offense, but he in a way seemed to suggest like he's still going to kind of be in it. I've got to see it to believe it. But do you feel like in a way that we can right the ship there? And, is Sirianni going to be a detriment, or is he going to end up being like, all right, you know what? You guys run it. I'm CEO, head coach, and I'll get out of the way.
Well, my biggest thing was I was a big proponent of just moving on from Sirianni because I thought he was maybe a little bit too prideful to kind of take that step back on offense. But it seems like based on the press conference, he's saying all the right things. The people that they're looking to hire at OC seem to be good targets for the most part, especially Kellen Moore, who's probably my number one target because of the success he's had in two different spots. But I mean, Sirianni has no choice at this point. He basically was given the same ultimatum that Doug Peterson was, but Doug Peterson said, "Hey, I won a Super Bowl. I can probably land another spot somewhere else. I don't need to change my staff and make all these changes that you guys want." When he ended up being right, because a year later he landed a job in Jacksonville. I just don't think Sirianni has that same reputation. Where if he did get fired from the Eagles, he would land another head coaching job somewhere else. So I mean, he kind of took the criticism, accepted it, and I feel like so far they're making all the right moves because if it is the case where he's just kind of that motivator, I mean, clearly the veterans like the way he had the practice schedule and giving them rest. And AJ Brown talked about how he liked how he stuck up for him and took the blame when it really wasn't even his thing. So I mean, in that aspect, I feel like people they like him, but obviously on offense, he needs to take a step back, and hopefully we'll see that happen with Kellen Moore, Cliff Kingsbury, or whoever comes in and runs the show on offense.
Yeah, definitely right there with you. It's there's been too many concerns, and also I think it's already telling that Brian Johnson is getting interviews. He was going to get some of those, but getting the amount of interviews for offensive coordinator, I think we're up to like 4 teams now with the offensive coordinator interviews, or at least requested that he's potentially
Yeah.
going to have. So the writing's on the wall. We saw tons of screen passes and all the other terrible stuff that we would have complained about, but I think it speaks for itself when other teams around the league go, yeah, we're not so scared about that. Like it might be more of Sirianni than what people want to believe, or at least some people admitting and saying, yeah, Sirianni's okay. He can hang around. So I agree. I'm with you. For those that, because Cliff Kingsbury is another name that's been out there. I've seen, if you're talking about like trying to get creative, the air raid offense, can he be able to help the blitz? Will he help Jalen? But you say Kellen Moore, and that's interesting. I've kind of gone back and forth, and I feel like with any candidate at this point, really, like we can go, oh, hey, here's some good stuff. Oh, wait a minute. No, here's some negative. So there's not like a rock solid, at least in my mind, where I'm like, oh yeah, without question, this dude, hire him, no concerns. We're going to argue about anything anyway, just Philly fans and all of us. But curious, just more insight, like why Kellen Moore over the other candidates so far from what we've heard.
Well, to me, I think Kingsbury is a little bit too much of what we saw already, where he kind of just spreads it out. A lot of shotgun, a lot of just empty sets where I mean, he does use the running back a little bit more with catching passes and whatnot, and he never had really the same amount of talent that the Eagles have. What probably does interest the Eagles is that Kyler Murray, with his legs and whatnot, kind of represents a similar skill set in that regard as Jalen Hurts. Whereas Kellen Moore, even though Dak Prescott can run, he's not the kind of runner that Jalen Hurts and Kyler Murray are. So, I mean, we haven't really seen Kellen Moore with a really mobile quarterback like Jalen Hurts. But I just like the fact that he was in 2 different spots, calling the plays in those spots and had success. I know a lot of people are criticizing him for last year, but I mean, the Chargers, they were they had a ton of injuries. Their offensive line isn't great. They were they Justin Herbert put up some ridiculous numbers with Mike Williams for those first 3 games, and I tweeted that out. And then basically the second he went down, I mean, Keenan Allen kind of took a step up and put up some crazy numbers too, but they didn't really have anything outside of that. Quentin Johnston wasn't very good as a rookie. Austin Eckler looked like a shell of himself, and like I said, their offensive line is not great. Their tight ends aren't great. There's nobody of Dallas Goedert's caliber there. So I feel like we've seen him have success. I kind of like his system where he's kind of willing to adapt to the personnel. He runs a little bit more under center than Cliff Kingsbury does. You see him use the running backs a lot more. Just the running game in general, he has a lot of creative schemes in that regard. He utilizes motion a whole lot more than Kingsbury, which is obviously a hot topic in Philadelphia right now because we were dead last in that regard. So I think Kellen Moore would be my top target. Gerard Johnson, I know a lot of people are shooting him down because he basically doesn't have any experience calling plays. But of course, people will be intrigued by his experience with Kyle Shanahan and playing the position and coaching for under several staffs, different places. So I feel like the Eagles are just like taking a look at a couple different candidates. The one interesting thing, though, is that Nick Sirianni at his press conference mentioned how the offense coordinator is going to have to be able to work with the quarterback. And now all 4 names that we've seen, I'm going to throw Jim Bob Cooter in there as well because he was reported early, no interview yet, supposedly. But all 4 of those guys played quarterback at least the college level or higher. So that's notable to me. I feel like if they want this guy to be able to relate to Jalen Hurts and make him take a step forward, obviously people are going to say, oh, Brian Johnson played quarterback or whatever too. But a lot of these guys have a lot more experience than Brian Johnson did besides Gerard Johnson. So I'm excited to see what happens. And I'm sure there'll probably be a couple more names in the next coming days.
Yeah, I agree with you. I saw your tweet about that too, about the quarterbacks, and it makes sense to me because again, in my mind, like I don't know. I feel like especially for you really can't. There's not a substitute, I guess, for experience than actually doing it. So if you have a quarterback coach who's been there, done that, high level, even if it's just college, but still at least that point, you can relate to what a quarterback's probably seeing on the field, game planning, prep, all that stuff. So I think it's huge and very beneficial. We can get into Jalen here in a second too, because I know that there's knock on him for various reasons, whether it's fake news or legit. So we can touch on that here in a second. But I was going to get to a couple more comments too. So let's see. I don't know exactly how to say this. Maybe Ape Jitsu, I think. But am I the only one feeling that we missed out on exactly what we need, and that being Vrabel to Philly? So whether that's defensive coordinator, head coach, probably more defensive coordinator, I would assume, for that comment there. But still, like Vrabel to Philly, would that have been better? Do you think better, worse from Fangio?
I don't know. I don't know if Vrabel's going to take a defensive coordinator job. Honestly, I feel like
Yeah.
he's probably going to do the Doug Peterson strategy, where he'll take a year off. He'll probably spend the year on Barstool or Pat McAfee or something like that, one of those shows,
Yeah.
and then come back a year later, and he'll probably be one of the top candidates next season. I just don't. I can't see him. He seems too prideful to be the type that's just going to take a step back, be a coordinator for a year, and then try it again. I think he'll just take a step back, and then hopefully something opens up for him next year, because I do think he's a really good head coach.
I agree. I think he does too. There's no way, like you say, if he takes a year off, there's no way in my mind he doesn't come back as a head coach somewhere, because we know like there's going to be several openings, several jobs next season, as there is every single year in the NFL. So I don't know. Would have been interesting. I think different philosophy, but as we've seen again, like whether it's Howie, whether it's Nick, whether it's Lori, whether it's a combination, they really enjoy or really prefer the Fangio scheme, like a lot of other coaches around the league do as well. But Jonathan Gannon was here, kind of running that flavor in a way, anyway. And then also you have Fangio as the consultant, which would have happened. That's a whole nother story of JG ruining it for an early season. But anyway, we will move on from that. Mel Stan, what's up? The Philly Special Show, good show, man. I appreciate it. Robert G. Bradbury has to go. Fact, he's a joke. I don't think there's any disagreements with you there. That is without question. Let's see, Robert, again, good show, guys. First time in on the chat. We appreciate you hanging out. I've seen you definitely comments on other shows, but appreciate you hanging out here for this. Unspoken words. I haven't seen this, Anthony, but maybe you have. Just a question. But he says, have you guys heard of a secondary coach yet? I don't think we've seen anything secondary, have we?
No, there hasn't been anything reported. My guess is that they probably will try and look out for somebody. There was, I'm forgetting the name now, but I had tweeted about it. The Dolphins, I believe, passing game coordinator and defensive back coach. He has ties to Vic Fangio, and he was brought to Miami by him. So I figure he'll probably be a target. His name's escaping me right now, but that's probably the one that seems like the most logical option, because DK McDonald, he is a very close friend of Nick Sirianni, so that might make things tough. But we saw Sirianni talk about how he had to have tough discussions and kind of end ties with people that he has friendships with. So I think McDonald is obviously an option to go and be replaced by somebody with more experience.
Yep, I agree. I was trying to pull that tweet up here too. It looks like, you had several names. Again, this is why you need to be following Anthony. Like if you haven't already, I'm just telling you, these types of tweets are regularity that he has out here. So tons of the info that I get, you guys know I to watch the regular show all the time, but it's coming from this dude right here. But I did find the tweet. You have a list of, a ridiculous amount of candidates here, honestly, but Fangio's defensive staff for the most recent role. So it looks like you had, the Ronaldo Hill for
Yes,
passing
there
game
you go.
coordinator, defensive backs coach. There's several. Broncos, Dolphins. You list them all out here. But again, go follow him. He's got the info on several different potential names to keep an eye out for. But good question as well. I don't think at the moment I've seen anything either. I was refreshing also just in case we get news breaking or other potential interviews, because Friday feels like that. Friday's always oh cool, I'm gonna just ease into the weekend, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh wait, no, that here's a
They
bomb
sneak
drop.
they sneak something in there, and then that's it.
They love to do it without it never fails every single time. Let's see here. We got some other questions, comments here. Let's see, where was that one? It is. Let's see. Betsy Martin, Fangio has a 3-4 scheme. We need a scheme that works with our roster, such as a 4-3 or 5-2. That's a good comment. I've heard that one before. I'm not too concerned on it, but should we be concerned? I'm curious to get your take first, Anthony. But with the personnel that we have, or the lack of personnel, that'll be a follow-up question, I guess. But 3-4 shouldn't be an issue if we decide to go that route, right?
It shouldn't be, but honestly, alignment-wise, it's going to look very similar to what they've been playing. A lot of five-man fronts, probably with 5-2-4, whatever the case may be. A lot of quarter coverage, a lot of cover six. But it's just like I said, the guy that you have calling the show and likely picking the personnel and whatever the case might be is going to be a lot different. So I feel like that's what's encouraging about it. I don't think there's going to be much drastic changes. They're not going to be sticking out guys in positions that they shouldn't be. I mean, you're going to still see Hassan Reddick dropping coverage. That's just part of the Fangio scheme. That's you're going to see it,
Don't love
unfortunately.
that.
I'm sorry, I'm apologizing now, but it's just how it's going to be. But I mean, we'll see what happens. I just feel like what I'm excited about is you're not going to see guys randomly brought in on third down that didn't play a snap all game, and now all of a sudden they're covering the other team's top receiver. It seems like Fangio's a bit more consistent with his roles, and he actually has a couple guys that played a lot of snaps for him last season that are going to be free agents, so they could be targets for the Eagles to kind of integrate in the offseason. But I'm excited to see the changes and additions that happen in the defense.
Yeah, I've prepared myself also, kind of like you're talking about with Hassan Reddick and others, because we will see it. And you had another tweet also that I referenced, but the Van Ginkel, and he was kind of like inside linebacker a little bit too. But for Dolphins, he played quite a bit or was dropped back into coverage quite a bit. But like you're alluding to, hopefully there's more teaching and coaching that goes on with that. Whereas it felt like at times, I mean, the dudes were just out on an island. Like they just don't know what's going on. Of course, it makes it harder whenever you've got in the middle of the season, the changes from defensive coordinator, different guy in your ear. What do they want to do? Is Patricia kind of running the size scheme, but kind of not, and wanting to do his own thing? It just was a total mess. We all know that, but I'm hopeful. I think it'd be different. Unspoken Words also said, I'm hoping we're multiple, I guess multiple fronts. One offense is confused, which I think we'll see, some variations, some differences, maybe a 3-4 traditionally, but when we've seen everything, I mean, everything from Fangio, different formations, schemes, fronts, throwing the
A lot of
offense off guard. So
a lot of post snap movement too. So he'll like
mhm.
present a too high look, and then the second the quarterback turns his back to fake a handoff or whatever the case might be, now he turns back around and there's only a single high safety, and they're kind of panicking, not knowing what to do. So a lot of it's actually not even pre snap disguise; it's a lot of post snap disguise where he's changing things at the last second, which we actually seen hurt the Eagles quite a bit this past year. So now we'll finally
Yeah,
be doing it. So
that would be nice for once, a change. Let me get to a super chat here and then go back to some of the personnel questions too. But Chris Brown, appreciate it, man. $2 says, we don't pay Swift. Some other team will. And then in parentheses, Dallas with a angry emoji. I hope that we do. I really have. I've talked about it a number of times. I think that DeAndre Swift, he played well. Obviously, that's a given. But it was like he was still, even to that point, was underutilized, and you could have had better. The run game could be better if you get a guy with a scheme that can open some things up in the passing game. Will also make life easier in the run game because it got so methodical and boring and stagnant and predictable, whatever else you want to call it. But I think that there's a lot of potential there. The question continues to be, though, with Howie Roseman, like, it just doesn't feel like he's ever going to do that. Like he just doesn't extend running backs as much as we might want to see it. Is there any hope in your mind, Anthony, like that he would for some reason extend Swift, or are we going to have to just come to terms with like Swift might end up on another team, even if it's Dallas?
I mean, like you said, if you're going off Howie Roseman's history, I would guess that he's not going to be re-signed. But I mean, if they bring in somebody like Cliff Kingsbury, who actually uses the running back as a pass catcher a lot, then Swift would be a perfect match in that scheme specifically. So I feel like it might depend on who the offense coordinator is and what scheme they're integrating. But I mean, there's also going to be, if you dive into the 2024 NFL draft, there's a lot of running backs that kind of offer that Christian McCaffrey skill set. I'm not saying that they're the same caliber, but in terms of that they can line up in the slot and win on a passing route, whatnot. So if you can find value there, I can't really fault the idea. I've always been team not pay running backs because I feel like you should just draft a running back every year in the third or fourth round, and then it's kind of like what the Ravens do, where you kind of just pump out guys that'll just work in the
Mm-hmm.
scheme. But I mean, and I feel like also the Eagles might think and say, oh, well, we let Miles Sanders walk last year, and he kind of stunk it up in Carolina. So why would we risk paying a running back again? Because Sanders wasn't very old when they let him go. So, I
It
mean, we'll
worked
see.
out in
I'd like
favor.
to see, yeah, I'd like to see Swift return, but I'm not counting on it.
Yeah, you're right. He was very. I was saying it beforehand, or I guess right after the Super Bowl, so it's easy, like what have you done for me lately, or not done in that sense. But I was like, without question, there's no doubt in my mind. Like, I don't care. We don't need Miles Sanders. We can get somebody else to replace. So most of the time I'm that way. It just, I don't know. There's maybe something about Swift. Maybe it's the fact that just how well he did, and I still it seemed like there was so much meat left on the bone. I'm like, yeah, you get him in here with this O line. So much more things you could do with him. But I hear you. At the same time, value wise, like you're talking about, you just stick on the rookie contracts, and you don't have to pay near as much, and you just have the same process of, all right, hey, we got our next guy. We're gonna get him through the draft. So either way, you have Kenny Gainwell. So if you believe in Kenny G as your lead back, no, they're gonna
And
have to get somebody else.
as you were saying with Swift, the crazy thing is it seemed like he was never really consistently used outside of that like Vikings game early in the season.
Hmm.
And then you look at the end of the year and he's like, wait, what? He's fifth in the NFL in rushing yards or whatever the case may
Yeah,
be. Like it's just like it didn't make sense because he was never used consistently, but then he still ended up being one of the top rushers in the NFL. So
yeah.
like you said, it just feels like there was so much meat left on the bone.
That's what drove me crazy. It really was. I was confused, and so many other things. I did want to throw this up here. Looks like there's a tweet from Andrew DeCecco, I think is how you say his last name. I'm not 100% sure, but good follow on Twitter, as many others are. But it was from Mike Caldwell. So again, potential coaching candidates for linebacker coach Mike Caldwell, defensive coordinator at the Jaguars, is interviewing with the Eagles, but a note that he received on Caldwell. So just for those that are curious, more insight about what he, I guess kind of the mantra in the locker room, but says for those curious, he was commanding in the room because he takes over. He teaches you the game and why we are doing what we do. He can relate to all players in the room no matter how they learn. If you ask me, he's the guy for the job. So that was a note from a source talking about Mike Caldwell. Again, there's interviews Caldwell, Joe Barry. There probably maybe will be some others, but so far I think that's the main two that we've seen. But again, I mean, I'll take that ringing endorsement if we're talking about potential candidates and who we might want to see here. So doesn't sound too bad. That's good.
Yeah, Caldwell, he played for the Eagles, played linebacker for the Eagles for several years. He coached in Philly earlier in his career. Then he ended up going with Doug Peterson. Now he's potentially coming back to Philly. So it seems like he's kind of destined to be here. And obviously, they need all the help they can get at the linebacker position. So if he's the voice in that room, I'm very excited.
Yep. Yep. Let's talk about while we're on the topic of voice in the room and the linebackers. There's personnel, Fangio being there. It there's certain positions that you definitely have to have in his scheme, and I'm not sure if we're there yet. Thankfully, we've got the draft coming up. Again, can't stress it enough. If you're not following Anthony, go do that. We're gonna have so many more shows, obviously, too. But Anthony's got the tracker on draft visits, who the Eagles are meeting with. We'll probably have mock draft info on potential targets and all that stuff. But there's a way to, fix it, or I guess shore up the defense in a way and get some other players out here. But where are we at right now, personnel? And, does Howie Roseman need to emphasize a little bit more on linebacker, especially with a Fangio scheme, if you're going to run the 3-4? How concerning, if we're trusting Fangio should be better, but you still got to have the right players. Where are we at kind of concern level on that side?
I mean, I think the front four of the defensive line is fine. I feel like you don't really have to address that, but everywhere else is a question mark, in my opinion, because obviously James Bradbury didn't look good. And then the linebackers, you can't trust Nakobe Dean to be healthy. I know people are saying, oh, it was just his first year as a starter, whatever the case may be, but hope is not an answer. So you need to have and address that position, either with a free agent or a high draft pick, hopefully both, because there's options in both areas. So, I mean, linebacker needs to be addressed. Obviously, safety needs to be addressed. And those two spots specifically, linebacker and safety, need to be addressed simply because they just don't have players there under contract. I mean, you have Reed Blankenship under contract. Kevin Byard is not being kept at that current cap number. I would be shocked if he comes back at that number.
Yeah.
So either he restructures or he's gone. And then at linebacker, you have Nakobe Dean, Ben Van Sumeren, and I don't know who else. I really don't think Anthony Nicholas Morrow's not under contract. Zach Cunningham's not under contract. Sean Bradley, who was on IR, is not under contract, I don't believe. So, I mean, you have to just add people at that position regardless. So whether they invest a big asset in it or not remains to be seen, but they need to do something there. And those two spots in particular and Fangio's scheme, it would help to have somebody great there.
Yeah. How about there's a comment here, so got to get to this. But Lar Powell, what's up? Says, does Jeremiah Trotter, if we're talking about someone to fit, Jeremiah Trotter Jr. fit with the Fangio scheme? It's a big name. I mean, I would love to see it, just regardless of seeing Trotter Jr. I've said it a number of times, but in the midnight green, like how iconic would that be? It'd be awesome. But I don't know. I'm not gonna lie. I don't know scheme wise as much as just, hey, does it fit? Is it the best fit? Do you have insight there? If not, I'm putting you on the spot. But what do you think, Jeremiah Trotter within the Fangio scheme?
I mean, he could totally fit. He's a lot better in coverage than Nakobe Dean is, but it's just he's kind of that same body type. He's a little bit of a smaller linebacker, so it depends on if the Eagles want another one of those. Where, I mean, injury wise, he doesn't have the same history as Nakobe Dean, so he's a little bit safer there probably. But obviously, the name will appeal to fans. He'll probably have the highest selling jersey among the rookie class if he lands here, or whatever the case might be.
For sure.
But it's just obviously he's a good fit. He's a good player, but I feel like every mock draft that I post on Twitter, if he's not on there, somebody
Hmm.
comments about it. So, I
Hmm.
mean, but there are other really good linebackers in this class that are a bit of that bigger body style that you're seeing become more popular in the NFL right now. Edgerrin Cooper is like the top linebacker in my opinion, and he's a ridiculous athlete. He's probably going to end right now. He's being mocked in like the second round or so, but he's probably going to be a first rounder when it's all said and done. Similar to how we saw Jack Campbell rise up the ranks last year because he's just another bigger linebacker freak athlete. I think he had like 8 sacks last season or something ridiculous as not even a primary pass rusher. He's just kind of just blitzing and making the most of it. Peyton Wilson out of North Carolina State, he's probably my personal favorite linebacker, regardless of rankings. He's another big body that can he's ridiculously good in coverage. Kind of reminds me of Logan Wilson, who went to the Bengals a couple years ago, who I was really hoping the Eagles would land. So any of those three, if they can land any of those three, it would be great. Junior Colson out of Michigan is another good target, but I feel like he's clearly the fourth in that bunch. But any of those four, and I feel like Eagles will be cooking. Obviously, there's going to be a ton of linebackers in free agency as well. So there's going to be answers out there. It's just a matter of if the Eagles choose to take one or not.
I'm hoping we do. I'm hoping maybe for a couple different reasons. But if you get a guy like Mike Caldwell, as we've been talking about, then maybe you go with a familiarity. You got to again, there's pros and cons with everything, but even like a Devin White and Levante David, who he's familiar with Tampa, coached them, or again, there's so many names out there in free agency. But to me, it's like I'm okay with going to the rookie class, but I feel like you gotta reshape this defensive. It's going to be a change scheme, or kind of a little bit scheme. It's already a Fangio, but it's the legit Fangio scheme, whatever we want to call that one. But you got to change or adjust to me like the mindset because there didn't feel like the same intensity. We talked about it on a number of shows of like, what's the identity? If I was to ask you, where is the identity of this team? And like, there's nothing from the defense. And now there's young players. I get that. So sometimes you got to wait for maybe a leader to rise to the top or a vocal leader at that, especially now with Fletcher Cox possibly not coming back. BG is there, but it's kind of a farewell tour. So you need someone to step up with a bigger presence. And Slay, a captain, but I don't think that he's that voice either. And, how long is he going to stick around anyway? There's someone that needs to be there. It's hard to say if you get it off of free agency, though, because sometimes that's just like, oh, well, hey, you got him for a year or two. So that's where I'm kind of going back and forth on. Can you get somebody in the rookie class, but they're not probably going to come in from day one and be like, hey, there's the vocal leader. But you got to shift this mindset because it seems to be lacking that physicality and intensity. Is there someone on this roster that you feel like can, I don't know, kind of assume that role, can get into that space and believe in, or do we not have anybody? Do we have to go get some, whether it is free agency or, hey, you wait for a rookie in this class and eventually they become that guy?
I mean, you heard Howie Roseman talk about him, but I feel like they're hoping that Nakobe Dean is that guy.
Yeah.
But like I said, you just if he's proven anything, it's that he's unreliable. So I mean, because even when he was playing, he didn't look the best. I feel like he didn't have a ton of flashy plays. He made a couple plays here and there. But one player that I feel like isn't being talked about in that regard enough, and he might not even have a huge role, but like I feel like he can be a vocal leader is Nolan Smith. I feel like he's got that attitude. You see him on the field celebrating and talking trash, and I feel like him, Sidney Brown. I feel like a lot of the rookies, Keely Ringo, even they were physical and they were kind of trying to set a tone, but it seemed like they weren't really allowed to play as they wanted to or play as much as they should have. Because I was calling for Sidney Brown to play for forever, and now obviously who knows when we'll see him. But I feel like they just need to add more players of that caliber that are willing to hit, willing to be physical, and willing to talk trash because that defense honestly seemed kind of soft. The team was honestly soft on
Hmm.
both sides of the ball, and hopefully Vic Fangio and whoever they bring in as OC and whatever positional coach changes they make can help kind of reignite that fire. And Because even Jalen Hurts himself, I know people have talked about it or whatever, how he's too calm and whatnot. But even like dancing wise, I don't remember him celebrating a single touchdown last season.
No.
Whereas the past couple years he was doing the gritty or whatever the case might be, where he was kind of celebrating and talking a little bit. So I want to see that again. I just want to see this team have some passion.
I do too. It wasn't as fun. I totally agree with you. There was so many moments where, again, it's like whenever your heart attack stress moments of every single game, I guess it's hard to be like, oh, let's get excited, let's get pumped up. But still, even in a couple of them against Miami and the Tampa game, I don't know. There's just moments whether like Jalen was not playing great, but we were doing well enough to have the lead, or vice versa, and it was a really close one. Or naturally for the losses, you don't feel it. But yeah, there was not near the same amount of fun that was being had. So got to get that back. Got to get the intensity. Let's get to some other comments here too. Again, appreciate you guys hanging out on a Friday. Hopefully you're off work already, having something, I guess refreshing to drink. But yeah, let's get to some of these questions here. So Hoopby says, is it smart to get a UDFA linebacker? I think we kind of already talked about this a little bit, but he says, I understand the hunger for them to perform to get a bigger contract, but don't you think we should get a proven linebacker? I think we kind of, again, like already touched on that with the comments of the linebacker, but you can find UDFAs. We've had TJ Edwards and others, but I feel like we're in the space of, either you invest in free agency, you invest in the draft, like you're talking about, whether it's Nakobe Dean or the names that you mentioned. I like some of the other possibilities, but we will see. Here's a shout out to, or Brandon Bolden, what's up, said, did they do the giveaway yet? No, for those that are tuning in or curious, the giveaway is going to happen here in just a bit, and we're going to spin for spin for the Jalen Hurts Blitz t-shirt. I did a Jalen Hurts deal. So you mentioning, questions, concerns about Hurts. I was like, hey, you know what? We're going to do insert breed of one in one of the previous videos. So anyone who did that, I think there's like 400 names or something, but I've got it ready. It's queued up. We get ready to go. Said, but yeah, we'll get that in a second. The crazy report too of Britton Covey and what he said or didn't say. I mean, it's not even surprising, I guess, because of who was the one that was bringing it up. I'm not even going to name names here, but there is still talking about Hurts and, not having, I guess, as much fun, or showing that. Is that a question towards Jalen and his leadership? Did the contract change him in a way, or should we just say, like, you know what, it was a frustrating season all around because there was so much change, and maybe there was, I don't want to say like, I don't know, dislike or hatred's way too strong of a word, but like Brian Johnson, Sirianni, Jalen, just some vibes being off offensively. Did it kind of lead or transition more into that?
I feel like that article was a nothing burger in my opinion. I kind of just brushed it off because it seemed like they were trying to kind of drag Jalen Hurts the way that they did with Carson Wentz, but whereas the things that were true about Wentz, which we ended up finding out were true, there really was nothing of note in that article about Jalen Hurts. Like, oh, he was a little bit more guarded after he got paid $200 million. Like, yeah, I would be too. I wouldn't want people coming at me asking for favors or asking for this. So of course I'm going to be more guarded. So it just seemed like, and we already know he's not the loudest guy in the room. He's not going to be hyping people up. He's not all over social media or whatever the case might be. So like, it didn't really bother me at all. I feel like they kind of, because the team struggled so much, they kind of tried to create a controversy. And I'm glad to see Britton Covey come out and talk about it and kind of make things right, because they were kind of just, they always do this. I mean, like you said, we're not going to name any names, but like they try and look for the little spit that they can and drag these players or whatever, expose them in a way, however they want to phrase it. But it just, but unfortunately, this is what happens when the team does as bad as it did. Because if this team was in the Super Bowl again, that story probably never would have been written. So it's just, if the team performs better, then things like this won't come out, or they won't even be fishing for them.
Yeah.
So it's unfortunate, but I really didn't think anything of it.
Yeah, I agree. It is fishing. Say what you will, I guess, as far as like Jalen and not being the loudest person in the room. I think we know that. But it's like the comments or the critique or whatever of, oh gosh, like maybe not believe in Eagles organization, maybe not believing in Hurts leadership, or they want him to be, a lot of other things than he is right now. It's like, okay, I'm sorry, but you understood who you were paying $255 million to. Like, I don't think that, anyone, let alone someone as smart as Jeffrey Lurie, who has led the organization, also been through this with a Carson Wentz, goes, I'm kind of skeptical, but let's just go ahead and give him 255 million. So you did your due diligence on this dude. It shouldn't be shocking, but again, like you say, sometimes there's reports that drag people through the mud and stir up something more controversy. Sure, players didn't play well, coaches didn't coach well, but I think it was kind of right in line there too. Not much else. Shout out to Bo. Hopefully you're smelling better, but much love from the UAE. Love the show. Appreciate that. Let's see. There's Adrian Martinez. How's it going? Says, I'm concerned how we're going to replace Kelce. Yeah, that's a good question. You think he's going? It feels like a foregone conclusion, but do you think he's coming back at all? Any chance?
I was actually talking to my brother about this. He's actually a Giants fan, but he brought up a good kind of. He's also big into wrestling, so maybe this is his like a wrestling pitch. But he was
Hey.
like, "What if if Jason Kelce was delaying his announcement because he's waiting for Travis Kelce's season to be over so that they can retire together and be the first brothers to ever be eligible to go into the Hall of Fame together?" So I mean, maybe that's a possibility. I never thought about it until he
Ah,
said it. But personally, of course, selfishly, I want Jason Kelce to return. But I mean, Cam Jurgens didn't look great at right guard, so it wouldn't be the end of the world to have him try at center. But I mean, I'm kind of at the point where if he retires, he retires. I feel like it sucks, but it's just I don't know when the last time a first team All Pro retired. Maybe Calvin Johnson did it. I don't know what he was back then, but like
hmm
Jason Kelsey's just a beast, and it's gonna suck when he walks away from the game. But at least he now has the podcast and whatever else where we're still gonna be able to see him quite a bit. It's just maybe not in an Eagles uniform.
yeah, that's going to be very heartbreaking. I was already emotional. I mean, well, for a number, that was a crazy day because we lost the playoff game, so upsetting, and then had baby number two, so really exciting, and then Kelsey's retiring, so it's just like a roller coaster of emotions and everything else. But it'll be naturally very emotional whenever he officially announces it. But there were, I guess, rumors, so who knows if it's true, but that maybe Travis Kelce was going to retire at the end of this season as well, depending on how it goes. So. Um, I don't know. That's an interesting theory. Your brother saying that. How is it with Giants fan and Eagles fan? I've got my brother's a Packers, and I've got a lot of family that are Cowboys too. But Giants and Eagles, how's that?
I'm in New York, born and raised in New York, so I'm in a family full of Giants fans. So it's just when I was about like 7 years old or so, I went to a Modell's, like a sporting goods store. My favorite color was green. I saw a Donovan McNabb jersey, picked it up. Thank God I didn't pick a Jets jersey. I grabbed the Donovan McNabb jersey, and the rest is history. So I mean, it's fun. It's a lot of banter back and forth, of course, but they were dragging me to Giants training camp when I was younger, getting me to get Eli Manning's autograph when he was a rookie or whatever. So I mean, it's been fun over the years, but obviously the past couple of years I've been winning the battles, so I'll take it.
Yeah, you've got quite a bit to hold over him there, even though they beat us in the final week. But yeah, you chose well. You survived. You stacked up against the odds, but or the odds were stacked up against you. But you made the right choice. My story is kind of similar because all Cowboys fans in Dallas, and went with the Birds. So there you go. I think you need to jump. Appreciate you getting on here. You good, or you need to get
Now you're good. You can keep going. It's all
good?
good.
Okay, a couple more times. Okay, we'll get
Yeah,
to some of these other questions then. Just let me know because I know how it goes, schedule, wife, and all that. So,
it's all right.
um, yes, but let's see. Pete Nathan here. What's up? What's up, man? Says you need a DC with an attitude. Not sure Vic Fangio is it. I don't know. I mean, if he's not the most like get in your face possibly, but there was the report of like Miami players not, I don't know, caring too much for some of his philosophy person. I don't know what that was, but Drew Rosenhaus, the agent of many Dolphins players, said that. It's um what do you think? Attitude wise, like can he
It's all signs point to him being like a tough coach that just teaches very hard and has his players be aggressive and he wants them to be physical. So I feel like if you watch the Eagles last season, that's exactly what you should be asking for. I mean, I don't care if he's like a rah-rah guy like Robert Saleh on the sideline where he's screaming in people's faces or whatever the case may be. I mean, if he's teaching these guys the right way, they're going to be in the right position to succeed, then that's all I really care about. Because if you watched Hard Knocks on the Dolphins during the season, he was never really on there, which makes me think that he's just kind of a quiet guy that just focuses on his work, teaches his guys, and that's about it. I mean, if he's not the most passionate guy or in your face person, then that's so maybe so be it. But I feel like his record speaks for itself. He's got a long career of putting up some really good defensive numbers. So I'm willing to give him a shot and see what happens.
people want him for a reason, and people want him for I guess his Fangio disciples for a reason. So there's reasons that they get hired or continue to get hired in interviews. Personnel question here. Again, I'm going to try to get to as many comments as possible. But Pete also follows up with saying Frankie Louvu from, and I don't know if I'm saying the last name correctly. I think that is, but from Carolina is a linebacker that we need. This is the time of year, and it's going to happen for the next several months probably, that players are going to get linked to Philly, and probably more so linebacker than a lot of others, given where the status is and the need there and Fangio's system and all this other stuff. But Frankie Louvu was linked as one of the big splashes that Philly could make or should make. I think Aaron Schatz of ESPN was the first one with that, but it's all speculation there. It would cost quite a bit. I don't mind it with, Frankie Louvu's the size, versatility. I talked about it on the show today if people hadn't seen it, but do you think, and I'll leave this maybe broad, Louvu, is it realistically an option there, and or do you think Howie's going to make any sort of splash, any, bigger signing like that and spend on the linebacker?
Well, we keep talking about how he mentioned, like he just came out and mentioned the Kobe Dean at the press conference and then brought up how successful the signing Zach Cunningham was or whatever. But I feel like you don't usually see Howie Roseman do that. So I feel like he was kind of doing that to maybe deter people from thinking that he's going to chase a big name in free agency because, I mean, I have about like 10 different names here or so of linebackers, free agent linebackers that make sense for the Eagles. So, I mean, I'll rattle through it. Patrick Queen, Blake Cashman, Frankie Louvu, Levante David, Jordan Brooks, Bobby Wagner, Aziz Al-Shair, Devin White, Josie Jewell, William Gay. I mean, you have so many players that they could target. Josie Jewell obviously stands out because he was in Denver with Vic Fangio. So I feel like, and we also saw the Eagles linked to him during the trade deadline. Diana Rossini, I mentioned his name with the Eagles. So I feel like if there was already existing interest and now you bring in his former DC or his former head coach in Denver to Philly, I feel like that could be a kind of a natural fit for maybe 2-3 years, whatever the case may be, because I think he is 29 or 30 years old. So kind of acting as that bridge veteran to help incorporate the scheme. Then obviously, like we talked about in the draft, there are a bunch of guys. So I feel like they may not go for the biggest name in free agency at linebacker, but I feel like just because of the amount of players that are available at the position, they're going to be able to grab a player or two that we probably don't expect them to because they really need to invest at the position.
Yeah, I hope that they do. That's the only issue is, as Pete also followed up saying that they're not really going to spend too much in that area. That's the sad part. Canucks Briggs, what's up, says probably a bit too much money as far as, even go back to the TJ Edwards, that's sort of the comment on that side. But, 6.5 million. I don't know what the legit report is because I've heard it from like TJ Edwards was not offered. He was offered. He wanted to go to Chicago, close to his hometown. It's been back and forth. So who knows what the truth is. But Clay Harbor, I think, was the most recent report that's saying that TJ Edwards did get an offer or did not get an offer from Howie. He wanted to stay in Philly. And, if that's the truth, if that's legit, then, that's the biggest L to me ever, because you could have TJ Edwards here for a $6.5 million. Like, that seems like a no-brainer. Again, hindsight's 2020, but knowing what we did or did not do this season with linebacker coverage, that would have been really nice. But yeah, there's a lot of names you mentioned there. It's just a question of like, is he willing to shell out, some of those guys, what, 10 million, even 15 million a year on a contract for those? I don't know. I would love to see a change. I'm just sometimes skeptical with Howie. Is he actually going to do something like that?
And it's going to come down to if their current teams want to actually let them walk because, I mean, the Ravens already paid Roquan Smith, so are they going to also pay Patrick Queen? The
True.
Texans, they have a ton of cash, like a ton of cap space, so they'll probably bring back Blake Cashman. But I wanted him years ago when he was coming out of the draft, but it just never happened. But they're probably going to pay him to bring him back. So a lot of these guys might not even hit the market. So we'll see. But there's a lot of names out there.
That's a hope. That's a hope. Zachary Barter here, what's up, says, let's sign Jeremy Chin as a safety linebacker hybrid. He was, linked to Philly a couple different times as there were buyers and sellers at the deadline, as, what hundreds of players seem to be. But he said, if we can't get Queen or White, should look at Al-Shair, like you're talking about. Bring Leonard back as a backup. Okay. Grab Whitehead at safety, then draft Trotter and Bullard in the second round. That is a lot of moves there. I don't hate him. There's a couple there that I'm not so sure about. Bring Leonard back as a backup. I think I'm out. Is there any reason to bring him back for linebacker after what we saw?
I mean, he was just a step too slow. I don't think he's going to be brought back. I mean, maybe as a backup, but is he too prideful to accept that? He's probably going to want to compete somewhere, and I certainly don't want him competing in Philadelphia. I was excited about him when he joined the team, but he showed that he was just a step too slow. He had a couple decent flashes here and there, but just not enough to. There's so many other options that I'd rather go with before him. That would be like a last second, like Miles Jack esque signing right before training camp or preseason, whatever. Like something like that. Like break
Yeah.
glass in case of emergency, not somebody you're
Bring
relying
back
on.
the plumber. Bring him back.
Yeah, yeah.
And then he goes to Pittsburgh. That was strange, I guess. We had a couple of those. What is it? Rashawn Evans, I think, signed, and then you're like, nah, I'm
Then he went to the
good.
Cowboys.
Go to Dallas, and then Miles
Yeah,
Jack is now I'm gonna retire, and then actually turns out back to Pittsburgh. Who knows? Who knows what that was? Maybe there's differences with the linebackers or linebackers coaching or personnel play style. I don't know, but kind of strange. Bringing back another player, talking about JJ. What's up? Says speaking of a comeback, thoughts on AJ Brown? Is that even a question? I know people are like,
no,
"Hey, the social media and all that other stuff."
he's not.
It's ridiculous.
He's not going anywhere. I mean, that's just nonsense. Apparently, people apparently said he did it before for the postseason or whatever the case might be. But and I know there's betting odds floating on who his next team
Mm-hmm.
is going to be or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
He's not going anywhere. I mean, that would be
The Texans are the
ridiculous if
favorite.
he's
If he it says,
that.
let me rephrase. If he were to be traded, they're the favorite. They're not the favorite for where he's going, but if he goes that way,
Yeah, that's not happening. That's crazy.
I agree. It's ridiculous for a number of reasons. I understand there's probably frustrations on his side, like there are with many players. But I mean, he's got Jalen. He's got one of his best friends. They had an awesome year last year. I know it was tough this year, but I can't imagine he's going to be like, no, that's it. It was too frustrating for a little bit of a stretch. We're I mean, not effectively like removing everyone because Sirianni's staying, but we're removing a lot of people, and it's going to be different. So, in my mind, I'd say, you know what, refresh, let's restart, do it the next season. But I'm not buying into any of that. There's too much speculation. Again, I'm not going to name names, but some people were like, oh, he's demanding a trade. That's not happening. There's no way that's legit. China, how's it going? What's up? Says fans are being so pessimistic. There's some of those, yes. If they fired Dan Campbell when the Lions were 3-13, they wouldn't be in the NFC Championship this year. Coaches need time to develop too. Yes, coaches need time. I guess it's in my mind, it's a little bit different for. It depends on the context of the situation and maybe expectations too for someone going to the job. Like I don't know that Dan Campbell going into the Lions job and then he goes 3-13, everyone goes, oh my gosh, it's a terrible failure. Maybe that's just my opinion, but like Sirianni coming off of a Super Bowl year and walking into this thing is, hey, this should be on the right track, and it kind of was in a very clunky way, but you were 10-1, and then it just totally fell off the tracks and crash and burn. I think that was more of just the context of it. But I mean, I still agree that you have to give a little bit more of a leeway. Sometimes there's possibly too quick of a trigger. But I'm I'm holding out as much as I can for Sirianni. Like I wanted him gone. I'll say that. I said it a number of times. I don't think that he's a great offensive mind. I think that he can be a good motivational type guy. He can be good with the players, building relationships, whatever, but he's just not a good offensive mind. You need someone else to run the offense. You need someone else to run the defense. Now, he said all the right things to the presser. Hopefully that's what we get. But if not, I mean, where do you fall on the line of thinking that, like, if we get these coordinators, maybe not as much with Fangio, because he might be more of, that lifer DC where he's not going to go get a head coaching job. But depending on who we get for the offensive coordinator, if they do a good job, then, I mean, it's almost like a shoe-in that they're going to get head coaching interviews and they'll probably be poached next season. So then you're almost like back to where you started with Sirianni, because he's not the guy to design the offense and you got to go hire someone else. Where are you at with that? Is it concerning long-term? Is this going to be kind of just a reoccurring issue basically, or is there something that they can kind of fix? Any belief maybe in, I don't know, Sirianni scheme-wise, or just another alternative?
Well, I was kind of against, like I said, Sirianni coming back, but now that he's kind of embraced that CEO role that we see Dan Campbell and even John Harbaugh having, two of the final four coaches that are remaining. So, I mean, like we've seen teams have success with this strategy. It was just more so a matter of Sirianni actually being able to take a step back and be less prideful and allowing somebody else to take control of the offense. And like you said, I was worried at first that, oh, we're going to have a great season and then somebody's going to hire the offense coordinator and then we're going to be back in the situation again. But after last season, I'll happily take that because that's a good problem to have. If people are poaching your coaching staff, it's a good thing. But at the same time, you have to be able to have that next person in line. And we saw, obviously, they thought Brian Johnson was the answer. He wasn't, and they moved on, or whatever the case may be. But I also think a lot of that was Sirianni kind of putting Brian Johnson in that box where he was saying, here, you can call the plays, but you can only call these plays. So it's just like now that he's a little bit more willing to allow whoever the OC is have more control, then I feel like that's going to be a huge help. And now having Fangio, who is a former head coach, on his staff is going to kind of open up his notebook and maybe have even more contacts to reach out to for people in the future if they do have to replace people later in the season or whatever the case might be. So I think just adding more experience around Sirianni is going to do nothing but help him. And I'm just excited to see him kind of embrace these changes. And I'm excited to see who's going to run the offense.
Yep. I'm and your favorite naturally. You said it earlier, but Kellen Moore being the favorite. Is that who you? If you had to predict, and I don't know if you need to jump here, but if you had to predict who it would be, I know your favorite being Kellen Moore. Do you think that that's where it's leaning towards, or is there difference between favorite versus realistic? Who you think they're going with right now in your mind?
I honestly I want Kellen Moore to be the guy, but I feel like Cliff Kingsbury is going to end up being the guy because I feel like Kingsbury having that head coaching experience in the NFL, they're kind of lean on that again because once again, I tweeted about this as well, maybe with an older candidate, but with like Frank Reich or whatever the case may be, like where they're going to try and hire an offensive and defense coordinator that are former head coaches because this way they're less likely to be poached in the next couple of years. So I think if they believe that Kingsbury is not going to be poached by another team, he kind of runs similar to what they did last season, where they can keep a lot of the same things, but he's just better, a lot better in certain areas than Sirianni as far as addressing the blitz. And he does use routes across the middle of the field a little bit more. So, I mean, it'll still be a lot of the same things, a lot of shotgun passing and whatnot, but he'll have a bit more answers to the problems that face the Eagles. So I think when it's all said and done, Kingsbury will probably be the guy, but Kellen Moore would be my top choice.
Well, either way, thank goodness if we can change some of it and help with the blitz, have some of those answers for Jalen. I mean, you look at Kyler Murray, there's some struggles naturally, and you look at the win-loss record. I know that's nothing stellar between Cliff Kingsbury and his time there as the head coach, but just the blitz numbers at how Kyler Murray handled those. I mean, 3 years with Cliff Kingsbury, or I guess 4 technically, but there's some injuries. But the 3 that were there improved them every single year against the blitz. So hopefully you kind of transition that to Jalen, figure some things out. And gosh, yeah, like you said, can we please just throw the ball over the middle of the field? How many times it was wide open, and you see the comparisons. It's all over the place, but like the comparisons when they had the graphic of the shot tracker, pass tracker, for where the ball is. Like every other quarterback, you got a lot of dots on the middle of the field, and Jalen's is like non-existent. There's like two passes over the middle of the field. What are we doing?
And then just the route trees for all the receivers too. Like I remember one week it was like the way Steichen was using Michael Pittman Jr. versus the way they were using AJ Brown. It was like he was aligning on one side of the field, only running routes on that side of the field. It was just. But one more thing about offense coordinator, I feel like I shot down kind of Gerard Johnson myself, but I feel like one thing you do have to keep in mind with him as an offensive coordinator target is if the Texans do lose Bobby Slowick to one of these final 2 spots that are open as head coaching vacancies, I feel like the Texans are going to promote Johnson to be their OC. So I think he's going to be an OC next year regardless. So if the Eagles feel like he's going to be the next hot name in coaching and they like what he did with CJ Stroud, they like his exposure to Kyle Shanahan's scheme, whatever the case may be, I feel like if they really do believe he's the next name up, they might be a little bit more willing, especially after landing Vic Fangio, a more experienced guy, to take a bit more of a risk on the offensive side. I know obviously they did the same thing with Brian Johnson last year, but maybe because Gerard Johnson had a lot more NFL experience as a player and coaching wise than Brian Johnson did. Brian Johnson never coached in the NFL before he got to the Eagles. So, I mean, that's just a huge, huge difference in those 2 regards. So I feel like I wouldn't rule him out. I feel like they do have legitimate interest, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's the guy, but I think out of those 3, Cliff Kingsbury is probably their choice.
That's fair. He may be a whole lot better, and I might regret this, in a year or 2, like you say, if Slowick goes and he's the OC and he's just killing it. But after what we saw with BJ, I'm like, I want someone who's at least done it before, to a certain standard, I guess. But
I agree.
Who knows? It could be a freezing cold take, and I regret it and be like, wow, we should have gotten him. So that's how it usually goes. Let's get to a couple others here too. Comments. Let's see. There is, oh, we got Leonard is washed. Yeah, there's lots of, obviously, the Shaq Leonard comment that we had earlier. Here's Nathaniel Bowden. What's up? Says, are we going to go get corners or develop the young ones we have? That's a great question, and I'm very, curious to hear your take, because you talked about a number of shows we did about Keely Ringo, Eli Ricks, when we should see them, and James Bradbury slipping off, and all these other things. But thoughts on that? I mean, we've got corners that we need to shore up, or the young guys need to, get more playing time and develop. But do we need to go get corners? Is it just one corner that we get, or is it you stick with the group that we have after what we saw?
My hope is James Bradbury is shipped out of the country somewhere, and then
And we
I
eat the
don't think they're
12
gonna.
million cap
Yeah, yeah.
hit.
What? Take it out of my paycheck that I don't get. But
There you go.
free agent wise, there's really not. I mean, Jalen Johnson's a big name, but he's going to get paid. L'Jarius Sneed's going to get paid. Kendall Fuller, he's probably the next best option, but I don't know if he really moves the needle as much as the other two. So, I mean, the free agents, there's not many options there. I mean, maybe Vic Fangio. I know this is not a famous name, especially among Giants fans, but Eli Apple had a decent year in Miami, so maybe he brings him over, like for familiarity's sake, on like a very cheap contract, just as the guy to compete. I'm not saying he's going to start, but just as another option. But then I feel like they need to take a corner with one of those first three picks because Darius Slay's not getting any younger. Obviously, he dealt with an injury last season, and he didn't look spectacular when he was playing, despite what he might say. And then I feel like Keely Ringo showed flashes, Eli Rick showed flashes. A lot of those younger guys showed flashes, but you can't just go into it hoping that they're going to take a step forward because that's not just doesn't happen. It's not a guarantee. So I feel like there are a lot of corners in the draft this year. Quinion Mitchell is probably my favorite out of Toledo. I feel like right now he's in like that second round range, but he's probably going to be a first round guy when it's all said and done. He reminds me of a lot Devon Witherspoon last year out of Illinois, so that went to the Seahawks.
Oh yeah.
He's a physical player, like you said. The defense needs tone setters, so I feel like he would be a perfect player there. There's a ton of corners though that they could target in that first or second round range with those picks that they have. So there's going to be options there. I think they should take one, and hopefully they do.
We'll see. Well, how we go outside of the typical trenches, line of thinking that he loves to go with. That's the other question. There's several different holes. I wouldn't mind seeing a little bit of a change up. But shout out to Joe Castro. He says, "Go Birds! What's up, man? Philly the podcast. If you're not subscribed, make sure to subscribe to Joe. He's going to be all over the place, traveling. I think he's going to be at the Senior Bowl, the Combine, the NFL Draft, and I'm probably forgetting like one or two others that he's going to be. He's all over the place, so going to have lots of good coverage. So make sure you go support. And there's also a link that I'll tweet out. But he's getting donations too for the trips and all that. It's not cheap to make all those trips, but as much content and everything, we appreciate Joe. Definitely going to have him on too. So let's see, a couple other comments here too. Let's see. China says the AJ trade is something Skip would say. That's just to get people talking and fired up, and this. It'll get worse. The sad part is it's going to get worse whenever the season ends, because then it's like, oh, what do we talk about? You kind of have some free agency, but until it fully hits, you got to have this drama and this speculation, and AJ's not going to be here, doesn't want to be here, all these other things. So sadly, probably what we're going to be. But we'll see. Joe actually commented back, though, and said, if we sign Cliff, I'll eat my mic on a live stream. Careful, Joe, because this is recorded now. So this is out there. Like, you can't delete this. So I hope you're good with that, because we've got it on record now. You're going to eat his mic. You heard it here. Everybody just make sure and hold him to that if and when we sign Cliff. Let's see here. Other questions. Pete says, can you cut James Bradbury post June 1st without a high dead cap? I don't think so. I'm not fully aware. I just looked at the initial cap hit. I can try to look it up here, but I think it was the 12 million. Let's see here.
I could be wrong. I thought I saw it being like 6 or 7 million, but I could be wrong. I don't remember exactly. I didn't dive into that. I'm still locked in on the draft right now. So
yeah. No, you may be right. Let's see. It is a while carrying okay, no, yeah, you're right. It says carrying a cap hit of 4.8, dead cap of 12.5. So yeah, I mean there's probably some ways to get out of it without the full, the full 12. I don't know 100% of the exact numbers there, but yeah, I mean, for what we've seen and talking about, it's got to be in Howie Roseman's mind. As sad as that is, you go from an all-pro player to like we don't even want him on the field. You know, how are you going to free up the cash flow there? Um, I don't know. The beauty is, and hey, we got a couple comments here too from Houston Minshew. What's up? Says Isaiah Rodgers is still on the roster at cornerback, as well as Harrison Sebring says point of view on cornerback Isaiah Rodgers, who is presently suspended and how he signed. Just curious the take there. I mean, he's sat out a year, so there's probably going to be some rust naturally with any position player like that. But I mean, the dude can make some plays. He's crazy fast and really quick. If he can, hopefully there's no step lost or just, again, that rust awareness getting back into flow. But I think he could make an impact. Do you feel like he's one of those that the potential, I guess, is there? We might see him as a starter, or where are we at with Isaiah Rodgers?
I mean, definitely to start the season, I feel like he could be the guy opposite of Darius Slay. But I mean, like you said, he spent the year out of the game, and you don't really see that too often. I mean, remember when Le'Veon Bell sat out a whole year and came back, got paid by the Jets, and looked like a shell of himself. So I mean, I know it's different positions, but just taking a year off is not easy. I mean, Rodgers is posting pictures all the time of him. Looks like he's working out in his backyard with his Eagles jersey and helmet on and stuff.
I saw that.
So I mean, clearly he's anxious to get back out there. I mean, he's a ridiculously good returner. He's played a lot of outside corner. I feel like he can play nickel too. That's what kind of excites me the most, because I don't think Avonte Maddox is going to be back next year. I feel like he's another corner that they can kind of let go because of his injury history and his cap number and whatnot. So, I mean, you could see two spots opened up on that starting between the three starting spots in at cornerback. So, it seems like Darius Slay has one spot locked up, and then nickel on the other outside spot could be up for grabs. So, I feel like Rodgers can certainly be in the conversation for either one of those. He has more experience on the outside, but I feel like he has the speed and the skill set to play inside too. So it's going to come down to what Vic Fangio wants. But he's certainly, especially at his cap cost, he's making like next to nothing. So, I mean, the Eagles are taking a flyer on him, and I'm sure it'll pay off.
It's intriguing for sure. I'm interested on that part, but then also you mentioned the returning. Like you see highlights, and Britton Covey was great. Don't get me wrong, but I'm curious. Like, would they ever consider like rotating or maybe it's just like kickoff? Like you could just do that, I suppose. But as good as Britton Covey was with punt return, he'd probably stay there. But you can't help and see some of the highlights and the speed that Rodgers has and go, maybe worth a return or two. Or if Covey's injured or something like that, definitely throw him back there. But yeah, I hope that there's not too much rust and we do see him performing pretty quick right away. But I guess another comment too, as we're talking about the corners, Andrew Nathan, he says, I would look to see if Jair Alexander's contract is tradable. It looks, potential for him to be gone from the Packers, and then cut JB and trade Slay. Some big moves, a lot of rotating people around. What about Jair Alexander? How do you feel about the maybe going after him or even moving around?
I mean, that would be awesome, but it's just like after what they invested in Slay and Bradbury last offseason, I just feel like it's not very feasible. I feel like this is the year that they're going to have to go a little cheaper at corner. They're probably going to move on Bradbury in some way. I doubt anybody's going to trade for him, so they might have to just do a post-June first cut. I think Maddox, they're going to move on from him too. So they're going to be eating a lot of money at corner. So I wouldn't expect them to be paying a ton of money or trading for a high caliber player at the position this year. Maybe next season we'll see them do that. But I mean, I think this year they'll draft the corner high, maybe sign a couple lower end names that we normally see them sign at linebacker or safety that we've become used to. So maybe they'll go cheaper at corner and kind of invest in linebackers and safeties in kind of a switcheroo.
Yeah, I would love to see it. Again, it would be totally off-brand, off-script, and as much as Howie said in his presser, like it was interesting because he got asked the question, like, hey, thoughts on the philosophy, right? And but not just linebackers, defensive line, just kind of the scheme or the building of the team. And he very quickly went to linebacker. So and Sirianni's referenced it a number of times, but like they get fed before the press conference what probably the topics, what everyone's talking about, the hot items, what they're going to be most likely criticized for. So Howie knew that going in, and even if he didn't get prepped, he probably already assumed and knew because he's up to date on everything. But it felt very defensive because of how quickly he got to that. It was like, well, let me, just the preconceived ideas of the linebackers and, blah, 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 and go into it. So it's like he knows. I'm just curious if, will that make him start thinking like, okay, I should come on board with this? Or does it like entrench him even more so in his philosophy of like, nah, I'm not invested in linebackers, because he talks about all the time, like, you got to be ahead of the curve. You can't be just kind of falling in a line. You got to be constantly ahead of the curve. And so if a lot of other teams have successful groups that have good linebackers, does he go, well, that's working for them, but hang on, I'm gonna be right if we don't go that route, or does he again maybe change things up? I'm hopeful that we see a little bit of a change. I don't know. There's some skepticism there. There's kind of a question too on the same topic. If Philly John Wick says, good name by the way, Philly John Wick, but spelled Jawn. That is, I've seen that one before, but that's pretty good. I don't think I'd caught that or said that before. But says, what's your thoughts on the report of the front office strongly suggesting analytics based game plan? So again, kind of goes hand in hand, I guess, with the personnel side of it, but more so in the game plan. Lots of analytics. We know that. It's Howie Roseman. It's why is the name escaping me? Alec Hallaby. That's it. Yeah. And the reports of like basically the coaching staff will sometimes just get an analytics report dropped on their desk, and hey, take it or leave it, but kind of take it. There's not a saying no to it and things like that. Analytics are great. I think all of us use a ton of them, and technology is just continuing to grow in every phase of everything, not just sports, but there does feel like there's a ton of motivation towards that side from the reports that we've heard, what Howie Roseman has emphasized, the players, and then even the game plan there. But I don't know, curious your thoughts on that side. Does it is it more heavily invested into the analytics based, or or where are we at as far as kind of Sirianni say game plan on both sides of the ball, or the analytics?
I feel like the Eagles for the past couple years have been very analytic based. I mean, I feel like that's why you see them going for it on fourth down so much, and that's probably why they elected to keep Sirianni, is because he does kind of embrace that and probably allows the analytics to kind of dictate when to go for it. You've seen him go for two in certain areas that you don't normally see teams go for two, or whatever the case may be. So they've kind of embraced that over the past couple of years, and I feel like that's kind of given them an edge a lot too. So, but just the NFL in general. I mean, Bobby Slowick and Zach Robinson, who's getting a lot of offensive coordinator looks as well, they both literally worked for Pro Football Focus for several years. So I feel like you're seeing the NFL as a whole kind of embrace a different way to look at numbers or whatever the case may be. I know a lot of people don't like PFF and their grading system or whatever the case may be, but they do provide a lot of useful information, and there are NFL teams that literally use their stuff. So I mean, we're just seeing the sport as a whole evolve. I mean, you're seeing it across every sport too, but I mean, the Eagles for the last couple of years have kind of embraced the analytics. And just going back to the other question about the spending at linebacker, and then that kind of idea for Howie Roseman, we kind of were saying the same thing years ago about him not investing in wide receivers, and then we saw him trade up for Devontae Smith and pay AJ Brown a ton of money. So hopefully we're going to see that with linebacker this time. They're going to kind of invest more. They kind of learned their lesson after throwing to whoever the receivers were a couple years ago, Jalen Rager and whatever nonsense that was out there. So, I mean,
despite
now
who it
they're
could
going
have
to
been,
see.
but we won't
Yeah,
go there.
exactly. Well, I don't know what you're talking about, but so so yeah. I mean, I feel like after seeing what happened last year at linebacker between the injuries and just the investments or lack of investments not working out, I feel like people have talked about Howie Roseman's always kind of overcorrecting when he gets exposed in certain areas. So this might be the offseason that we see him go heavy and invest in linebacker and safety, or one or the other, whatever the case might be.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think about that one, but yeah, just kind of showing the willingness to change or to correct, overcorrect, whatever we want to call it on that side. But hopefully it is. And speaking of hope, happy little Trey here says hoping that Rogers kid is a dog. Absolutely, we're hoping he is. Turns into a stud. Chris says he's a slot guy. What's up, Chris? How's it going, man? Let's see. DB Talking Now says Cliff Kingsbury may not be bad. All right, yeah, possibly. We'll see. Hopefully, if that ends up being Nick Nichols, welcome back, Greedy. Are we talking about Greedy Williams? Do we want Greedy Williams after what we saw? Like, there was a reason he didn't stick around, but would that help in a major way? Does someone believe that, or is that sarcasm?
That might be Greedy Williams' burner account right there.
It might be, yeah, just a random nick. Hey, you know what? Appreciate the thought. Like there's there's always options. I thought, he might get some playing time at least. I was a little bit surprised, as quick as he came, he also left. But we get some other guys there. So here's one that I would like. I don't think it's realistic, but Brent Davis, and I don't think there's any family relation, but C.J. Gardner-Johnson, please come back to Philly. That's a big loss there. I don't know, maybe I was just kind of in denial at first whenever it happened. I'm like, yeah, he was good, but we'll figure it out. We'll be fine. We'll get someone replace. Reed'll be good. Maybe we'll trade, sign, and didn't exactly happen. I know Justin Evans and the kind of rotation of Terrell Edmonds and others, and then even Kevin Byard, which turned out to be not great. But that was a big miss. That was a loss there. Certainly, C.J. Gardner-Johnson. Even if we wanted him to come back, I don't think he would come back. I really don't. The way that all played out, I don't think he would come back to Philly.
I feel like they would just have to throw like way more money than any other team is offering him, like
Yeah.
just to kind of overcompensate for what happened last season. Which, I mean, I feel like both sides were kind of wrong. I feel like there was a way to meet in the middle, but it just didn't happen. But I mean, there are going to be quite a few options at safety in free agency. I mean, Antoine Winfield Jr., Cameron Curl, Xavier McKinney, Geno Stone, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who we just talked about, Alohi Gilman, Darnell Savage, and then actually two safeties that played a lot for Vic Fangio. So you have Deshaun Elliott and Brandon Jones. And Elliott actually led the Dolphins in defensive snaps. So he played a ton. Obviously, he has a ton of experience in Fangio's scheme. So I feel like him, Alex Van Ginkel, they can be two big targets for the Eagles to kind of prioritize at two positions of need and kind of help incorporate that Fangio scheme. But yeah, safety, they need to do something. CJ would be great, but I'm not. I think that bridge is burned. So
Sadly, yeah, the reports of being like very far off between what either side was going to do, and a total slight. It was just funny though, because I mean, I remember, almost a year ago now, but C.J. Gardner-Johnson's posting, essentially like, oh, I got this deal with Detroit done. And everyone's going like, what? That's a terrible deal. But then, Eagles are like, oh, you got to be kidding me. Howie didn't offer something like that. And at first, like, oh yeah, they did. They offered him basically the equivalent or better. Then you come to, you look at like the closer part of it, and it's like, well, there's not a whole lot guaranteed on that side. So it does feel like you could have gotten much closer to it. But maybe, I don't know, maybe the emotional part, their fear of he did a lot of. There's a lot of deleted tweets. Let's just say that there was a ton of deleted tweets. If reporting wise, you wanted to know what C.J. Gardner-Johnson was doing, you had to screenshot tweets, because I think there were more deleted tweets than actually ones that stayed up there. So
that was a messy situation. So
that might have played a factor in it. But yeah, not the best. And I will say this: I don't mind rooting for or cheering for Detroit by any means, and C.J. Gardner-Johnson, because I would much rather them go to the Super Bowl than the 49ers. I'm going to be, if the 49ers
I don't want to see any red in the Super Bowl. Give me Ravens, Lions, and then I'll be happy with either one that wins. I just tired of seeing the Chiefs win. I mean,
Agreed.
Kelce would be a cool story, but obviously the 49ers, no, thank you. So
yes, despite you wearing red today, it's not any support for the the Chiefs.
It's not Christmas season anymore. Sorry.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, okay. Good. I was gonna say it felt like sarcasm, but Nick commented back and said sarcasm. So there you go. The comment on earlier before of a Greedy Williams. Let's see. There's a couple other comments. You still good? Making sure, because I know.
Okay. I'm gonna head out soon, Phil. Whenever
right.
you're good.
Cool. Let's see. The other question here though. Kenny Mo, what's up? Says, what's up, guys? I would like an OC that would be creative. Teams last year said our offense was predictable. Exactly. Yeah. That's kind of what we've been talking about. Get someone who's going to be different. Sirianni said it's going to be creative, going to be a little bit of a new scheme, different ideas, and then threw in the whole, like, we'll keep some of what we're doing. There's some things that work.
In my eyes, that was like, hey, we're going to keep the tush push, but everything else is going to get thrown out. So that was my guess. That was my take on it.
I hope so. Yeah. My thought was more pessimistic whenever he said it at first, because as soon as he did, I thought to myself, oh gosh, please no. That's going to mean we're going to have some screens, and we're going to have or draw on 3rd and 11. Like I was like, please no. But hopefully you're right. There are some elements that have worked and are legit. So tush push is not changing. Hopefully that's one of the only ones that sticks around. And you change up a lot of other stuff.
No more screens with guys running into each other and stuff
Oh
like
my
that.
gosh,
So
yeah, or yeah, handoffs that DeAndre Swift and I mean, it was like you're watching a comedy of against Dallas whenever AJ's in motion and like we're in the live stream and like I froze. I was not even sure how to announce it. I'm literally like, what just happened? Are you kidding me? You have a wide receiver run into the running back, fumble the football. Thankfully, Tyler Steen lands on it, but it's the comedy of errors, and unfortunately, way too many times this season. But get some change. Get some new guys in there. Kubichi, what's up? Says, yo, I hope we get King as, Cliff Kingsbury as OC. It would be a good pickup. And what's up, Josh? How's the newborn? Congrats, by the way. Appreciate that. Yes, we're doing well. Sleep is hit or miss, but we were doing well.
you get more sleep than Mick Sirianni, probably.
It's true. That's probably, the stress that he has and all the interviews and everything else that you can
that
tell.
guy needs a nap.
it's just a constant, never ending. He needs a nap. It's Sean Robinson here, going back to the CJ comment. Said CJ literally had his car stolen after a playoff dub. Are we surprised he's not in love with Philly?
Fair point.
Not really, no. Neo Blitz says the stream room is fire. Appreciate that. Thanks.
Mine? Yeah, thank you very much. I know.
Yeah. I mean, that's a unique setup right there. Got the car going.
I swear I have a house. I swear I do. It's just,
hey, we get it.
I got a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old running around in there, so this is only the quiet space.
That works, yes. Landon Thomas said, bro, I wish Doug Peterson was here. Interesting. I don't know. I mean, there were moments, but I mean, obviously he left because he had, it feels like, we don't know officially, but kind of read between the lines. It feels like he had a very similar meeting with Lurie as Sirianni did recently, of probably an ultimatum, like, hey, you got to let these guys go. You got to probably take a step back. You need to have someone in here who runs the offense, things like that. And Doug didn't want it. And he's like, all right, well, we're going to have to separate because that's not how I'm going to run things. I'm the head coach, and didn't work out. So, it was fine. We go after Sirianni. We saw what happened in a couple seasons. Just unfortunately, we're back to similar-ish, but Sirianni willing to, I guess, swallow his pride and say, yeah, we'll make some changes. I want to stick around. So,
basically, Press Taylor and Brian Johnson were in the same scenario.
Yeah.
One got fired and one got kept. So that's really what it came down to. It seemed like.
Yeah. That is a very good point. Let's see. Zachary Barter says, also why I mentioned drafting Javon Bullard. I know it's another dog, but he has a lot of comparisons to CJ GJ, plus a physical guy, which this defense needs. Absolutely. We were talking about this a second ago. Really need the physicality.
A lot of fun safeties in this draft class. I mean, I have a list of them here, but Cameron Kinchins, Tyler Nubin, Kalen Bullock, there's 2 Utah safeties, Sion Vaki and Cole Bishop. Javon Bullard I have on there. Jaden Hicks, and a little bit of a sleeper here is Trey Taylor from Air Force. He won quite a bit of awards. I think he won the Jim Thorpe Award as the top defensive back in the country. So, I mean, for a guy from Air Force to win that award is pretty impressive. And the Senior Bowl, obviously, coming up is going to change a lot of rankings and expose people to a lot of players that they haven't watched before. But those are some of the names that I'm going to be watching for. So, it's good. It's a fun safety class.
I'm excited. I'm looking forward to that. Definitely keeping us posted with all the players, and like I mentioned before too, I mean you've got the tracker with all the draft visit, which is very important. I'm sure that just about everybody realizes this, but who the Eagles meet with usually says a lot about who they're probably going to draft, or at least leaning towards drafting. So
specifically the top 30 visits and the formal meetings at the combine, because those are kind of the most exclusive, so you might say. So. I mean, those you should really pay attention to, because I think over the last 5 or 6 years, I think half of their picks have been either had formal meetings or top 30 visits with them. So those are really the ones to keep an eye on for. But with the tracker, I kind of keep track of everything that I see. If I see an Eagles scout in the background of a pro day video, I kind of put that down, and I just try and. There's only 5 players on there right now, but with the Senior Bowl coming up and then pro days, the combine, all that stuff, so I'll try and update it as much as I can.
There you go. Yeah, I've got it pulled up here too. Again, just Anthony, keeping everybody posted, OutsideDiBirds.com, and there it is. I mean, the key is awesome too with the top 30 visits or the formal meetings and pro day interest, all this other stuff. But I remember it from last season, and the amount of work that you put into this is absolute insanity. So people go check it out. It is very well worth bookmarking or saving the link, because it's going to be updated, and it'll tell a very good story of, potential guys, potential candidates. So as always,
you could even go
really
look
good
back
stuff.
at last year's and see which guys they drafted from the list and kind of see what interest they showed in them too. It's good to go back and see
Yeah.
like, oh, they signed this guy as an undrafted free agent and they were at his pro day or whatever, like kind of connecting the dots. I mean, maybe I go a little too far with it, but that's how I've always been with the team. So I just feel like sharing it. So
It doesn't bother me. I just, it's more power to you, and kudos to you for actually taking the time. I don't know if if family appreciates you taking that much time to dive into it, but you catch just about everything. I mean, even the stuff that you mentioned before of like some random Eagles scout like in the background of a video. I've heard you mention that before too. So it's like, hey, you know your stuff.
I'm trying.
I will drop the link too. I don't think I have it in the video yet, but I'll put the link in the description. So for people watching this back, it should be there now. But yeah, it's been good. You need to jump?
Yeah, I'm going to go.
Okay, all right. Hey, we appreciate you having it again. If you're not
Thank you,
following,
everybody.
I'll say it again. Go follow Anthony DiBona. We're gonna have several video shows. It's been a little bit since having you back on, but always good to connect. Hopefully, all goes well, and enjoy the family. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. Thank you, guys.
There he goes, Anthony DiBona. Dude, that guy knows his stuff. I try to stay on top of like regular daily news and everything else, but Anthony is insane with his knowledge of just Eagles and scouting and draft coverage, and obviously, like you saw, just the names that he has for potential targets, and whether it's free agency, but also the draft. Like the draft is, you heard it, insanity for everything that he's going to keep track of. So we'll have him on quite a bit, but appreciate him jumping on there. But however, how's everybody else going? It's a Friday afternoon, Friday evening, depending on what time zone you're in. I guess it could be I guess it could be Saturday, depending on if you're overseas or where you're watching from. But let me know where, and how y'all think, or what are y'all thinking about the news so far? We've got the DC, been talking about it for a bit on this one. Also, this weekend, unfortunately, we are not in the NFC Championship game. Didn't even win a playoff game. That's a little bit depressing. It feels like it came in waves, as far as we're getting over the disappointment, I guess, of not winning a playoff game, and then all of a sudden you get the next round, and it like reminds you, it just like opens up that wound again, and, oh yeah, we're not playing, we didn't even win a game. It probably is going to be that way all the way through the Super Bowl, unfortunately. But we got the defensive coordinator. Whether you feel like that's good or bad, we have our defensive coordinator, and most likely going to have the positional coaches, I feel like, fairly soon. It would make sense if you give it a little bit of time for Fangio to be involved in the conversations. I mean, maybe he is already, but fully plan out what that's going to look like, guys that are going to change. But the report has been that there's going to be some changes at the positional coaches, as well as offensive coordinators that we're waiting on. So I feel like I agree with Anthony. He said that Cliff Kingsbury feels like the most likely. I'm kind of right there too. Maybe we get another name that gets thrown out there that we haven't seen, and catches everybody off guard. But so far, seems like it'd be Sirianni going with Kingsbury. Maybe a Kellen Moore, but it does. If you're saying someone's going to be in charge of the offense and the talk about having that experience, I think head coach wise, you'd go with someone who has head coach experience. Hoop Beast, great collaboration. He knows his stuff for sure. Absolutely. Yep. Anthony's awesome. Noxacow, I may not say that correctly, but this is great therapy. All right. Well, we can all hang out and have a therapy together. So appreciate you joining. Andrew, I like it. Kubici, it's my Friday. I'm so glad I don't have to work tomorrow. Oh, isn't that the truth? The weekend is here. Ernest watching from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. There you go. Appreciate you joining. Philly Freak, TGIF, South Florida. Yanni Snipe, do you like Vic Fangio? I think so. I mean, yes. I'll just say yes first off. Do I love it? Not entirely, but it's going to be better. I've usually leaned on the side of like, okay, it'd be cool to have someone that could be aggressive or to change things up or dictate something to the offense. But, this felt like the route that you probably were going to get. I didn't think Fangio, I'm going to be honest, you guys know watching the show, I didn't think Fangio was a possibility until all of a sudden it's like, whoa, they're mutually parting ways. And then it's like, well, okay, that's the writing's on the wall. But it did seem like you might get a candidate that's in that kind of frame of reference, one that uses those types of schemes. If it's not exactly Fangio, it's similar. Just didn't think that route. But again, if you're going to go with a Fangio scheme, why not have the creator himself? Talked about it on the video. There's reasons to like it. If you've got guys like Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, Matt LaFleur, who all say that it is the most difficult to game plan against Fangio, then that says something. Now, again, it's cat and mouse because you're playing this game of trying to better the system and to get advantages against it. And so it's like everything else in the NFL, like the Legion of Boom, the Seattle defense. They figured out how to stop opposing offenses, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, you got to try to force the ball deeper. You got to throw it deep on them. You got to beat them. Teams start figuring it out. But at first, defenses copy it. They're like, oh, we got to build this Legion of Boom of our own. And then whenever it starts not working, well, we got to shift something else. So it's constant involvement, but I think that Fangio is the guy that can actually change some stuff. He's got his base formation. He's got his base system, but he's been around for forever. So I wouldn't say that's a concern of, oh gosh, well, he's never going to be able to fix something or he's never going to be able to make it work. You got the guy who knows what he's doing. I'm going to throw this one up here too. This was a tweet that I liked. It was on McVay for Fangio, kind of an endorsement, but an article from, I believe it's like 2020 or 2021, but it was going back to obviously McVay whenever they lost the Super Bowl and to the Patriots, and Vic Fangio's scheme had kind of exposed him. And, McVay basically obsessed with the elements of Fangio's defense. McVay and then defensive coordinator Brandon Staley engaged in epic, hyper-competitive clashes at practice. So I'm just saying, like for someone to keep Sean McVay up at night and make him adjust his philosophy, figure out how to beat his defense, it works. But then it's a copycat league, so you do have to change and adjust some stuff. I'm confident it'll be much better. I'll say that. I don't know if it's going to be perfect. It may not be a top 10. It may not even be a top 15 defense. But if I feel like with our offense, we should be good enough to really compete and really have a chance at going to the Super Bowl. And in my opinion, if you're top 20 or better, you should have a chance. Now, hopefully it's better than that. I agree with you. Hopefully it's better. But it doesn't have to be a ridiculous, best defense in the league for you to win. Rich King never thought we would not be in the Super Bowl. I know it felt that way, especially starting 10-1, even with the flaws. It just kind of felt like, well, we're going to figure some stuff out and be fine. But here we are. Brent, Dallas Cowgirls lost in the first round of the playoffs. So I guess that is good. Yep. Makes it better. Misery loves company, and at least if they were still in it, that would be terrible. I don't know how I would be having to cope some other way. I'd be like, oh man, you serious? You got Dallas still in this thing? There's a chance for them to, go to the Super Bowl. Kubici says, bro, I'm glad we lost. We had no chance, and I'm honestly just waiting for the draft. That will be more exciting than the season we had. Okay, I mean, I can understand, I guess, the philosophy. You did need to lose to have some bigger changes, because if you had gone through the playoffs and I don't know, I feel like you could have had changes if we beat Tampa and then lost. certainly if you won both games, if you beat Tampa and then you beat Detroit, that would have been, I think that would have been enough to keep everyone just about. Maybe, get a new defensive coordinator probably, because that's just a weird thing in general with how that went down. But offensive side, you probably keep everyone. I don't know. I get the line of thinking. I just could never get there. I was gonna blindly like support and cheer and be behind this team as much as I knew that, yeah, it's probably like long term, maybe not to our benefit, but there was just part of me that was like, man, if we could just somehow, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, catch fire, get lucky, find something. Maybe we could do enough to get to an NFC Championship game, and then all bets are off. Didn't happen, though, unfortunately. Wanisha Young, honestly, I just feel like I'm holding my breath. The Eagles talk so much, I'm waiting to see what they are actually going to do. That's fair. It's lots of talk and lip service and not much change, certainly during the season. We're seeing some changes now, though. That's good. Kadarian Mallet, what's up? Says, I'm just not in love with Cliff as OC. It feels too much like Nick's offense. They have too much in common for me. I think Eric Bieniemy or Moore are the better fits for what we have on offense. Yeah, I mean, Anthony talked about it a second ago whenever he was here, but it's going to be similar. I mean, what did we expect? I'll be shocked. Maybe I'm wrong, because there's still the chance that, maybe you interview more candidates and you get an Eric Bieniemy, or you do interview, or you already interviewed Kellen Moore, but you go beyond just a virtual interview and you do decide to go that route. But I just, in my mind, I never felt like it was going to be, hey, Nick Sirianni's totally adjusting and shifting the mindset of someone's coming in, but it is an absolute brand new scheme that we haven't seen before in this system, haven't seen with this group, haven't seen with Sirianni. Like, I didn't think it's going to be that much change. So that's where I'm kind of leaning towards. It's going to be some similarities. As much as we might hate it, it'll be better, should be better. But how much better is the question? Can it be good enough? We got the talent. Canucks Break sending love from the hometown of our unfortunate birds. Appreciate that. Yep. Hopefully going to change, though. RJ, I'm wary of Kellen Moore. Cowboys fans seem to love the idea of him coming here. Yeah, that's interesting. I've seen both. I've seen both sides. I've seen, being in Dallas, like there's people that are like, laughing because they're like, oh yeah, great. Hey, you guys sign him, see how it works for you. But then there's some that I've heard even going like, hey, that would actually probably be a pretty good hire, because the offense was pretty good under Kellen Moore. I think it was number 2 offense during his duration, or maybe even got up to number 1 of the seasons. But overall, 4 years, second only behind the Chiefs. So, I mean, that's saying something. Again, nobody's perfect, and the Chargers weren't great, but there were some other issues behind that too, I think. Andrew, what's up? Says in LA, got baseball tryouts tomorrow. You a Phil's guy, Josh? Not really. No, I'll watch. I honestly kind of just, baseball, America's pastime. Like if it's on, I kind of watch. Playoff time, like I'll get behind them. Like I'll support. I really just kind of like the intense Game 7. Hey, let's get it, but not a whole lot. Brad, I can't imagine you ever getting upset about anything. You have a smooth personality. Thanks. I appreciate that. I mean, I try to, you guys know, people that watch the channel, watch the show, I try to find like a silver lining, try to be optimistic. At the end of the day, it's just a game. Like, let's be honest, it's just a game. I can get a little upset, yeah, but try to find a little bit of humor, make someone laugh. It's not the biggest, most important thing in life. So I try to have fun with it. But there are times, my wife would tell you, others would tell you, I can get upset. There's moments. I think we all have that point. Ease of football. I think I'm saying that correctly. But do you think Nick Sirianni should stay on at head coach? He's going to, but honestly, I would have said no. I think it was time to change just because of his scheme or lack of scheme. So you're going to have to just see if the offensive coordinator would do better, and he steps aside. So we'll see. Again, shout out to Anthony for coming on. Says, thanks for having me on. Thank you all for watching. Absolutely. Anthony, appreciate you being here. Go check him out. So much great content for the draft and everything else. Kubici, Fangio will be good. We just have to give him the personnel and the players. We probably like him more than in Miami. That's another factor. Yeah, he's motivated to be here. Philly native, get him back home. You know, he wanted to be here last season. Like, regardless, if you go back and look at some of the interviews or watch those, especially whenever the decision for, like, you know, being in Miami, and he's even asked, like, you know, oh, hey, there's so many reasons for being in the Miami area or being in Florida and all this other stuff. It's like, and then even, you know, what was the reason behind it? And it doesn't feel like it's the most, like, complete sold, you know, it's oh, love the area. And sure, some of those pressers with any head coach or any coordinator, they're going to say the right things, but it did feel like one of those where you're just kind of like, well, kind of like the team and, you know, the potential here, blah, blah, blah. He didn't sell me the most on it. So I'm just saying, I think he probably assumed he was going to be there for the defensive coordinator until JG goes, oh no, Philly's keeping me, right, wrong, or indifferent. I'm staying here. And we know how that turned out. Yeah, Sean, whoever the OC ends up being, I just want some longevity. I don't want a guy who's going to leave after a year for a head coach position. That's the challenge, because I think that it's just about whoever they hire. I mean, everyone that's been linked, everyone that's interviewed, there's no lifers to me that I'm saying, like, oh, that guy's going to be offensive coordinator. I mean, maybe Frank Reich, but they haven't interviewed him, and apparently, like, he hasn't even been called by Sirianni. Frank Reich hasn't gotten the option or possibility of offensive coordinator. So in that case, you know, the guys that we talked about, Kellen Moore, Cliff Kingsbury, Gerard Johnson, any of those guys do well in the first year, they're probably getting poached. Maybe they stick around for like a one more season type of deal, but it doesn't feel like it's going to be a long duration. Let's get to some of these other comments too for Super Bowl. We got Sir Ravens versus Lions happening. There you go. I would love that. I don't know if we'll see that. Philly Freak, yeah, would love to see the Lions beat the 49ers. Please, imagine the 49ers then if they lose to the Lions. Oh boy. Pete, we would have gone to the NFC Championship game or divisional game if Sean Desai was DC. Maybe so. That's sad, but maybe so. Would have been worse than Patricia. We shouldn't have made that change. Obviously, hindsight's 2020, but guys were so confused all over the place. Brent Davis also, Baltimore and Lions. Yeah, that's the consensus, obviously. I think that the Lions are who everyone's going to cheer for. All right, let's do the giveaway, too. I know that I'd mentioned that for the shirt, so everybody that had typed in Breed of One in the past video, you know, I was going to give away the Jalen Hurts, and let's see, I'll throw this up here, but give away the Jalen Hurts Blitz t-shirt. So let's see, there we go. Yeah, that is it. That is what we're going to spin for. So I got a random comment picker that we're going to go to, and whoever that lands on, then if you could just comment back and share. I'm going to need some info, but let me pull that up here in a second. And if you win it, this is the only issue. Sometimes whenever we do this, I don't hear back from the winner, and then we have to do it over and over again, which we will, but we'll let it sit for, I don't know, a few days. I'll post it on the community page too for anybody who's watching this back late. And, you know, we might have to spin this thing a couple times, so stay tuned over the next several days. Even if your name is not the one that comes up here, there's definitely a chance for somebody to win it who doesn't get the initial spin. So All right, I'm going to share the screen, and I know that doesn't look like much, but random picker, and here we go. Good luck to everybody. Who is it going to be? There you go. Congrats to Reggie D2334. You won. You were the winner of the Jalen Hurts Blitz t-shirt. Again, this one right here. So yeah, Reggie, just hit me up in the comments, or if you want to email me, I'll put the email afterwards here in the comments too. But in contact info, you can also DM me on Twitter if you're not following, but at the PHI Special. So however you need to get a hold of me, but congrats on the shirt. I will send that out to you as soon as possible. If it's not claimed, again, we'll go through a lot of people if we don't have that one. Yeah, it's amazing how mad this team can make you. That happens quite a bit. Ron, what's up from West Virginia? What's up? How's it going? Brent says Eric Bieniemy has to be the Eagles' OC because he can protect Jalen Hurts and he can be the best to tell Jalen Hurts to throw away the football if nobody's wide open. I mean, he'd be better. You're going to get a ton of throwing, though, so that's something that we continue to say is, do you want to just throw the football constantly? Matthew, who do you think we're getting for running back? I don't know. It's a good question. I feel like DeAndre Swift is not going to be here, but we'll see. We're going to have people that, I'm sure free agency, tons of guys, rookies, all that, but we'll get into it. We'll have plenty of shows there. Let's see. Super chat here. I'm going to get to you real quick. Andy Reid, family YouTube. Appreciate it. Andy Reid retiring 24, maybe Eagles reunion 25. Probably not. Wouldn't mind it, but he's probably, once he's done, he's done. But yes, I'm going to jump over. So Pete saying, when's your Zoom thing? It is right now, actually. So I'm going to jump over there. For those that are not sure what that is, it's for members that are Hungry Dogs tearing up. So Hungry Dog and Breed of One, it's an hour Zoom call. So just a better way to like FaceTime, video conference, talk birds, get to know, I guess, more personal. So yeah, I'm going to jump over there, but appreciate everybody jumping in and joining today. Hopefully you guys have a incredible weekend. Awesome time. Obviously, if there's any breaking news, I'll hop on and we'll discuss it, but appreciate you guys as always and all the support. But maybe I see you in the live stream here in a second, or the Zoom call. There's a link for those that do have the membership. There's a link in the community page, which I'll continue to post every time we do it. But it's basically the last Friday of every month. So if you're curious on that, that's how you get in on it. But I will see you guys there, and you guys have a good weekend. Go Birds.